Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's about 3 o'clock, and as is our custom, we'll wait for about a minute to see who else joins us. Some of the principal actors today are here, thank goodness. So welcome, Sophie.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm hoping that Debbie's here as well, Debbie Carrington from Finance, and FA, my deputy.
FA's here. I haven't seen. Oh, yes, Debbie's here too.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little after 3. I think we will make a start, and if anyone joins us, we'll welcome them at the appropriate time. So welcome everyone to this special meeting of the Public Accountability Board, out of our normal sync, because this is the meeting where the agenda is very brief but very important. It's where we set the budget, accept the budget for the coming year, and set the council tax precept for the coming year. So in a moment I'll ask Sophie if she will introduce the paper that she's produced. Before I do that, let me do the usual housekeeping things. We are being video recorded and it will be uploaded on the website if the quality is okay. So if you don't want to be part of that, then you should absent yourself immediately. We've got some apologies. Michelle Buttery, my chief executive, apologises. Erica Redfern. Michelle's actually at a funeral. Erica can't be with us. Are there any other apologies? Chief Constable can't be with us, but Marcus is here, the deputy is here. Yeah. Any others that we know of?
Tim Fogler and Dave Hartley.
Thanks so much. So Tim and Dave, we note those. Thank you. Moving on in our agenda, then come to item 3, announcements. I think the only announcement I've got, in a sense, is that one of our staff is leaving us and won't be seen beyond this week. That's Lindsay with a D. Lindsay Dudley, who's been our comms person until now. She came on a temporary contract for 1 year that ends on March 31st, and she is actually going off on maternity leave, so we wish her well for that and the birth of her baby in due course. Item 4, public questions. There aren't any. Item 5, there are no urgent items. Declarations of interest. Are there any other declarations of interest that we need to note? I note that Tim has actually appeared on my list of people attending, so perhaps we knock him off the apologies.
Apologies, Commissioner. I just was very slightly delayed in my last meeting.
That's okay.
I'm with you.
We're glad to have you. We thought you weren't coming at all. So that was item 6, declaration of interest. We come then to item 7, which is the substance of the meeting. So I think this is probably going to be a fairly short meeting, but a very important one nevertheless because of what we're doing this afternoon. So we're setting the budget for the force, for the OPCC, for victim services for the coming financial year starting on April the 1st, and also setting the precept for council tax pay across South Yorkshire as well. I'll just say a few words and then I'll ask Sophie to point us to some of the headlines that we've got in the papers that you have in front of you today. What we're doing today comes at the end of quite a long period of consultation, which we're very aware of from the office, but others may not be aware of. But we have to consult the public. We do that in all sorts of ways. Normally we do a lot of face-to-face engagement work and community groups, parish councils, town councils, that sort of thing. That's been very attenuated this year. So we've had to rely more and more on an online survey, and Fiona can tell us about that. But we've had public consultations. 67% of the people that were consulted, that responded, have said they're supportive of what's put before us today, which is good. We've also had to consult the leaders of the district councils, 4 leaders, and the mayor, the elected mayor for the Sheffield City region. We've done that and they're supportive as well. And then the period of consultation ends with having to present what you have today to the police and crime panel, some of whom are with us this afternoon, and I'm glad to say that the Police and Crime Panel accepted these proposals, and this year they did it unanimously. I've not had that before in the time that I've been PCC, so that was very gratifying. So all the political parties represented on the Police and Crime Panel supported this, as did 2 independent members as well. So it's a good place for us to be this afternoon. So the recommendation this afternoon is set out in paragraph 2. I won't read all of that. It's 2A to F, but essentially we are confirming all that's in front of us, the budget, the precept, the reserve strategy, the capital strategy, treasury management strategy, and so on. And I'll leave Sophie to, as I say, give us the headlines for that. I think it'd be true to say that this budget, what this budget will do for South Yorkshire Police, is something really very significant in my view. This year, probably for at least a decade, we're able to increase police officer numbers by a really substantial amount. A very, very considerable number of police officer posts will be created as a result of this budget. Now, some of those come as a direct result of the government's commitment to put back the 20,000 officers that were cut during the years of austerity, and in this budget, 149 of the posts that are commended in para 6.2 come from that government funding. And 7 of those, 149 out of that, 7 of those will be going to the regional crime unit, organised crime unit, the ROCU, leaving us with 142. But that, in a sense, that simply takes the strength of the force back to where it was in 2010. It's a restoration of what was lost during that period. What we're also able to do today is to go beyond that and to increase officer numbers by a further 79 from our own local resources. So when you put those two together, 228 additional officers into the force in the financial year beginning on April the 1st, that is a very big increase in numbers. And I hope that people will begin to see the benefit of that in terms of their neighbourhood teams. More high visibility jackets along the street is one of the things that people constantly tell us they want to see, but also give the force more scope with things like its investigative ability, capacity, more detectives and so on. So it's an important budget for all sorts of reasons for SYP. And perhaps at the end I'll ask Mark if he would just have a quick reflection on how the force see this. So I think we're going to see neighbourhood teams strengthened in the coming financial year, and as I say, the investigative capacity of the force I think strengthened as well. It also means that I'm able to commission those important services to victims that we all want to see, and we're committed to in the Police and Crime Plan. And all this for about 20, for most council taxpayers in South Yorkshire, it'll be around about 20p a week extra in their council tax, which is not a huge sum of money. I am very mindful of the fact that people in South Yorkshire are financially struggling and up against it. We've set out the figures in the report so that we can see what the impact of the precept will be, and Sophie may well refer to that in what she's got to say. But for most people who are in bands A and B properties in South Yorkshire, it's about 20p a week additional funding this year. I'll draw my remarks to a close, and as I say, get Sophie to do some headlining of what's in the report. But perhaps as I do end these remarks, I could thank those who put the budget together. It is a huge task every year. A lot of work is represented in these comparatively few pages that you have here. So I would like to thank Sophie, Effie, her team for what they've done, and Debbie, Cheryl, and those in the forces financial team as well. We're most grateful to you, and it's all been done in a timely way, and in a way which I think is very accessible to us all, and I thank you for that. So Sophie, shall I hand over to you to tell us what we've got in front of us?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. As you've already said, this is where we come to you to request approval formally for the budget that we're wanting to set this year. The budget requirement, which is a statutory figure that we have to produce within this report, is 296 million, and that's set out in section 7 of the report. And we're proposing an annual council tax increase of £15 for a Band D property, and that will take the council tax up to £213.04 for a Band D property. Just in relation to the budget itself, you've already talked about the meeting with the leaders and the budget familiarisation meeting and panel meeting, and the views of the panel and the outcome of the consultation with the public, looking at Appendices A and B. Just in terms of the consultation, we've got over 2,160 respondents to the survey that we put out, and 67% of those supported the maximum precept increase. The next part of the report talks about the police and crime plan, which has been reviewed, and the shift in focus that can be seen at Appendix C, and the plan will go up until May this year, until the Police and Crime Commissioner election. But just a note in terms of force performance, there's been a lot of progress that's been made in recent years. And the latest HMIC FRS report, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, addressed the efficiency, effectiveness and legitimacy of South Yorkshire, saying it was good in all areas and outstanding in some subcategories, which we really need to be proud of. Just moving on to section 5, the national funding settlement gave the police and crime commissioners in England flexibility to increase funding of up to £15 council tax limit on a Band D property, and all the government allocations assumed the maximum precept increase. In South Yorkshire, we received a 4.9% cash increase, but based on current inflation projections, it actually represented a 1.85% reduction after officer uplift had been excluded. The capital allocation, council tax support and freeze grants, and continued at a flat cash rate, and the violence reduction unit funding has recently been announced, with 1.6 million being available to South Yorkshire, subject to a bidding process. The key highlight is, as you've said, Commissioner, already, that the government has committed to the police officer numbers and the increase of 20,000 nationally before the next general election, and the figures that we're all expected to play our part, and the figures that we're looking at are outlined in the table in 6.3. So that comes to 149 for the national uplift in the next financial year, which is 141 for South Yorkshire and the balance for the regional organised crime unit, and then we're putting in sufficient funding for 79 officers to be recruited from our own resources. In terms of the council tax itself, I've just draw your attention to paragraph 7.1, that even though we're proposing a £15 precept increase on a Band D property, 75% of properties within South Yorkshire are in bands A or B, and of those, a number of them can claim a reduction in council tax through the council tax reduction schemes. So a part of the consideration has been whether people can afford it, but those people on the council tax reduction scheme should be impacted to a lesser extent. And the table on page 5 then shows the proposed precept for each different council tax band and the weekly increase, which ranges from 19 pence in a band A to 58 pence in a band H. In terms of the budget itself, we have got some investment into prioritised growth, and that's outlined in paragraph 7.4. So that relates to essential core and uplift delivery, enhancement of the operating model with the force priorities, and they include digital forensics unit review, officer uplift, improved IT structure and technology enabled team, as well as the communications data review. We've got £2.6 million that are actually reflected in the budget, but that we're putting forward, we'll have to find an additional 10.7 million in order to be able to balance the MTRS, and work is being undertaken on that over the next few months. Legacy issues, I think we're all familiar with those. So we've got civil claims arising from the Hillsborough disaster, the cost of the National Crime Agency's ongoing investigation into historical sex abuse, exploitation and CSE civil claims. Those legacy issues are also included in the MTRS, and they're expected to cost £133 million up to 25-26, and that will require £20 million of local resource to be put in there. The actual MTRS itself is shown at paragraph 7.7, that's just for information. So that's the proposed budget in millions. And obviously we've got a more detailed breakdown of that. The impact of it means that we're going to have to use £5.8 million from reserves to balance in 21-22. It will be through a combination of savings and use of reserves in the longer term to balance off the 19.9 million that we need throughout the MTRS period. It's not sustainable to keep using reserves, and the Appendix E is our reserve strategy, which shows that the prudent minimum reserve balance, which is based on SIPA guidance of 5%, and that could only be sustained on the in current forecasts until 2025-26. So just in order to balance the MTRS, I do need to caveat that there are some things we need to do. So we need to achieve clarity about the spending review and levels of grant funding to increase uplift officers beyond 21-22, because that's not clear. Excuse me. As part of the Forces integrated planning process, we need to look at balancing demand and the need for efficiency savings. We'll be trying for an improved deal on legacy cost funding from the Home Office, and also there'll be we'll need to consider precept flexibility in the future, albeit because this is a generous precept settlement that we've been allowed to have through the government, it may be to a lesser extent. Finally, paragraph 8 is a statutory paragraph that we have to put in, section 25 report on the robustness of estimates. And there are a number of things within paragraph of section 8 that are highlighted as caveats to the budget, really. The main ones are to do with the funding settlement, that it is just a one-year settlement, so we need to have clarity moving forward. This is our best estimate based on the information that we've got. And then the tax-based and collection fund balances. It's been particularly difficult this year to assess those, and we've worked very hard with the local authorities to get to final positions. So the final position is that's been notified by each of the 4 local authorities in the area, but it is complicated due to COVID-19 and nobody's certain about what may happen in the future. So we've just done our most prudent estimate, which is based on information that we've got. There are a few other factors in there which I won't go through particularly. I'll assume that people have read them. And I'll move on to the adequacy of reserve statement. That's Appendix E. The strategy for reserve reflects the position, as I said, to maintain a level of general reserves at 5% or above, because we can't rely on that, on the use of reserves in the future all the time. So that's where we've gone to, and we've said that we will use earmarked reserves before we go down to the minimum level of general reserve. So in summary, in terms of the general report, it's recommended that the 296 million budget be approved, the increase of precept on £15 on a Band D property is levied to support police officer numbers in 21-22 and improve existing services. We recognise that despite the precept increase, there will still have to be some savings made and some use of PCC resources and reserves. Are there any questions on that part before I just go on to the appendices?
I should plough on, Sophie, and we'll see at the end.
Thank you. I don't actually propose to go all through all of the appendices, just to give you a quick summary of some of the key points. In terms of the precept setting letter, there's a copy there to show that the panel have approved the precept, and there's a consultation report on the police and crime plan addendum that I've already mentioned. In terms of the commissioning and commissioning needs assessment report, That's about the process that we undertook in order to get to the commissioning budget. So it's been prepared on the basis of a needs assessment in consultation with partners and other key stakeholders. We looked at the external funding that was available, because a lot of the commissioning funding is from the Ministry of Justice to support victims. And we've looked at the existing commitments, taken those into account, and then prioritised the remainder to come up with a plan that supports the budget. So that's a brief summary of Appendix D. In terms of the reserve strategy, which is shown in Appendix E, you'll be able to see from that that the reserve at the moment is 50 million, including all reserves, but it'll go down to 25 million, including the insurance reserve, by the end of the period, which, when we look at the general reserve, that's the bit where it dips slightly below the 5%. Reserves can be only used once, and we're currently going to have a look at the SIP for guidance again and just make sure that our assumptions for reserves are in line with the SIP for guidance and the 5%. So that's a piece of work that will be ongoing throughout the year with the Strategic Finance Committee. We've got money on one side for legacy costs and insurance claims, and we will need to keep some money on one side for legacy. So that's basically a summary of the key bits of the reserve strategy. In terms of Appendix F, which is the capital strategy, capital planning is in line. The capital strategy and planning is in line with the estates, IT and fleet strategies which underpin it. The estate strategy is currently being updated because we're not collaborating on estates and using the same team as fire anymore. So that's going to have a refresh. And with, the capital programme comes out of all those individual strategies and is being prioritised accordingly, according to need. The programme itself, in terms of capital, is 70.7 million in 21-22, and there's a breakdown of that on page 42. We're forecasting at the moment that we will need to borrow the majority of that money for capital investment, and so the borrowing costs and the interest charges are included in the MTRS based around the capital programme. The Treasury Management Strategy, Appendix G, that is underpinned by the capital strategy, so they're all very much interlinked. Treasury Management includes cash flows, investment and borrowing, etc., to make sure that we're able to operate as a force. The thing that we're really I'm asking the PCC to do is to continue with the adoption of the Prudential Code. There's some prudential indicators in there. The Prudential Code is a code which SIPFA put forward. It is a voluntary code, however, it's seen as best practice to use that code. So all the indicators we have within the Treasury Management Strategy are based around the SIPFA Prudential Framework and Treasury Management Code of Practice. There are no changes proposed to the strategy except for the consideration of foreign investment within strict parameters, and that's because the sovereign rating of the UK is slightly less than some of our some foreign counterparts, and that's actually shown in the investment strategy. And then the second thing that we were wanting to change is that we'd like to be able to open some money market funds, again within particular limits and categories of counterparty, and that's in order to maximise options that we've got as to where to place our money and to maximise returns safely in a low interest environment. And paragraph 13 of that report then shows the budget assumptions in associated with Treasury Management. I think they're the key highlights, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Sophie. You mentioned in there Appendix, what is it, V, the Public Consultation Report. Fiona, I see you're on the line. I wonder if you'd like to say a brief word about the consultation. I did mention it briefly.
Yeah, I'll just try and start my video. My video doesn't appear to be working at the moment, so I'll plough on if you can hear me, if that's all right. There we go. We undertook statutory consultation during December and January. Normally we would preempt this throughout the year with lots of consultation at events in the community. Obviously, due to COVID, we weren't doing that this year. But we've done various things online, including a survey in the autumn around priorities and asking members of the public if they would be willing to spend more money to achieve those priorities. So we did the preempting consultation, and then just before Christmas we started the official consultation, which lasted around a month. That was done through social media online and the website, and it was supported well by South Yorkshire Police and their Twitter channels, as well as the went out on the South Yorkshire Alert. So we got it out as far and wide as we could using the online resources, and managed to get responses from over 2,000 residents. As Sophie stated, we've got overwhelming support of over 2/3, 67% were in favour of the proposed rise of £15 on a Band D property. And we've got the priorities of where they would like to see the spending, including visibility, presence, neighbourhoods, visible policing and resources to tackle serious crime, which were reflected in the survey that we'd done in the autumn as well. The results were fairly similar on there. I think that was about it really, nothing further to add on there.
Thanks, and perhaps we can thank, I see Kirsty Hatton on the line, perhaps we can thank the police comms team for their cooperation with all of that. I got some bad feedback. I don't know whether that's because we got some rogue mics on, but it's gone, so I think we're okay. Thank you very much, Fiona. Steve Ragg, who's chairman of the Joint Independent Audit Committee, I see your comments, Steve.
The only comment I've got, Commissioner, is that everything looks as though it's been done as expertly as you would expect it to be. I wonder around the precept though, whether there's some work being done on the affordability and whether with COVID around, the residents will be able to continue to pay the council tax throughout the year, and if not, what other measures have we got in place we thought about to counter that?
Well, yes, I think that was one of the issues that was very much on my mind both last year and this year, because I think economically we're going through a hard time, and it's, as you say, with the coronavirus and the impact now on businesses in South Yorkshire, we obviously don't know the full outcome of that, but it's not going to be good for a lot of people. And this was something that the leaders impressed upon me when I was talking to them, and indeed, in fairness, the Police and Crime Panel as well, all made the same point. And I think we tried very hard to keep this as low as we can. But my own feeling is that when you look at the breakdown of those figures in the report for who pays what in South Yorkshire, we have so many properties that are in those lower bands that it really isn't a huge increase that we're asking for in terms of pennies per week. But we are aware of the financial, the economic position that people are in. Of course, who gets a rebate and how much is a matter for the local authority rather than for ourselves. But clearly there are a lot of people. Is it about 34%, Sophie, who do get some sort of rebate, I think, in South Yorkshire, who are in those bands?
It is, Commissioner, yes, yeah. There are council tax support schemes that have been agreed by each of the local authorities. The government has actually given each local authority some grant towards their council tax support scheme, but because it has a knock-on effect onto the police budget as a precept raising agency, we've also we're expecting a grant. We've actually put that on one side in a council tax reserve, support grant reserve, because we're not sure when it will affect us and the timing of it. So the council tax relief that is being proposed by local authorities also filters through to us as well.
Thank you. Does that answer the question, Steve?
It does, yeah, thanks. Obviously, from my perspective, I just need to know the considerations taking place of that, and we have got contingencies in place if it doesn't work out the way that we've planned.
Okay, thank you very much. I think finally then perhaps Mark, would you like to offer a South Yorkshire Police comment on the budget, and not the police but the budget perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really heartening the level of public support for the increase. We'd like to think that's recognition of the fact that the public are seeing an uplift in the performance of the force. Certainly over the last few years, everyone will be well aware, but I think 3 years on the run, we're the most improved force in the country. Happily, we can't actually achieve that this year because we haven't got enough headroom. So we can't have that big jump in performance because we're hovering pretty near the top of what HMIC view as good. So that's really heartening. I think we are acutely aware, we certainly don't take for granted the additional support this year. It's very welcome. We recognise the economic difficulties of people in this part of the world. Of course, last year, again, these difficult choices, we had the lowest precepts in the country. So it is a balancing act which we recognise. So we're very much appreciative of the support this year by maximising the precepts. I think, as you referenced, Commissioner, the public do want to see a greater presence in neighbourhoods. We've now reinstituted neighbourhoods across the county, and there's a further programme to increase those with the uplift of officers. But as I'm sure people can appreciate, there's far more that we need to do beyond the neighbourhood function. So, for example, this year we've enhanced our firearms capability to deal with gun crime issues. We've further enhanced the off-road capability. We know that's a real bone of contention for many of our communities, so we've enhanced that. We're enhancing public protection further, which deals with some of the most pernicious crimes in society, which is often hidden but causes great damage. Whilst it's really welcome that we've got the uplifting officers, we've got to bear in mind that we've got police staff as well who do really valuable work. And while the government funding will facilitate the increase in officers, that does create tensions elsewhere in the budget because we've got to support it as an organisation. I think we've all been really heartened with the investment in Atlas Court, our communications system, both in terms of technology to make it more stable and give us a better quality of service. But part of that as well is an uplift in police staff in Atlas, which means that we can answer calls better and give a better quality of service to what is still predominantly the front door into the organisation. So it's a positive picture. This enables us hopefully to continue that improvement and make sure that it's sustainable as we go forward. Again, for reassurance of the panel and the public, these decisions are all taken with a lot of discussion over months between the Commissioner's financial team, our financial team. We go into an exceptional amount of detail to really try and weigh it up and make sure that we get the balance right. There are difficult choices to make, but I think this gives us the platform to continue the improvement in the force over the coming year.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, I think a lot of the public think that the 20,000 officers that were lost were all officers in uniform who were down their street, whereas in fact, of course, it was across the board in policing terms. And I think you're right about staff. It's very easy to talk about increasing police officer numbers without realising that it has a knock-on effect in terms of their support from police staff. And one of the things that police and crime commissioners are currently doing, that's all of us, of all political persuasions across the country, is saying to the police minister and the home secretary, don't just talk about 20,000 police officers. We also need support for police staff, because we're going to have to increase staff if we're going to give proper support to our police officers. So that's an ongoing, I think, conversation. But thank you for that. And yes, and I think in all the time that I've been doing this, I can't remember a time when there was so much goodwill towards the force on the part of the public. We've had our moments of, well, we've had our ups and downs, or we've had some very serious downs, but at the moment I think there's real genuine appreciation of what the force has done, not least through these difficult months of the coronavirus, but real support for the force, which is represented in those online survey figures. So thank you very much for that. I think that's everything, unless somebody else wants to make a comment at all or ask a question. If not, can I thank again Sophie and Debbie and their teams for all the work that's gone into this. Just to take you back to the second paragraph, the recommendation, and I'll very briefly read that then to say this is what's being recommended to me and I accept it. It's recommended that the PCC formally approves the following in accordance with the Local Government and Finance Act 1992. A budget requirement for 2021-22 of 296 million as set out in section 7 of the report. B, a proposed annual increase in council tax precept for 2021-22 of £15 for a band D, etc. C, the reserve strategy, Appendix E. D, a capital strategy and programme, Appendix F. E, the Treasury Management Strategy and minimum revenue provision, that's Appendix G. And finally, to note the Chief Finance Officer's statement on the robustness of estimates. So I accept all of those, and I think that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting. I don't think there's any other business, don't think there can be. And the date and time of our next ordinary meeting is the 10th of March at 9 AM. So I look forward to seeing everybody then. I wish you all good afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.